Hello everyone, welcome. Today what I decided to do was give a overview about writing about art. Now some of you are probably familiar with doing a research project or doing some level of research for a typical paper, an academic paper. There's some similarities, there's some overlap, but I also think there's some very unique instances how art historical writing and scholarship and research papers are very different. They act as a very different type of exercise, which I think is a good way of, whether you're an art major or any major, psychology major, science major, and business even, it's helpful. There's transferable and applicable skills that you can learn in the approach about how to research a particular art piece and not how that could carry over to other aspects of your career, your job, your interests, or even your daily life. So I'm going to walk you through some of those processes, those different techniques, and I also want to show you basically the layout this semester for the papers that you will be doing. I'm going to walk you through a couple of basically like just kind of exercises or icebreakers in terms of looking, evaluating, seeing in art, and how to write about it. Okay. So first of all, if you're looking at Schoology, and I'm scrolling down on our Schoology page here, writing about art is in this folder here. And not only does it have the parameters of each project, like the visual analysis, which is your paper number 1, the iconographic analysis, which is paper number 2, and the historical analysis, which is paper number 3, but also has some writing resources. The first thing to make note of, most of these papers are 2 to 3 pages, the historical analysis being a little bit longer, 3 to 4 pages, which is double spaced, 12-point Times New Roman. So it isn't necessarily a lengthy amount of writing, but it should be very succinct and have, like, say, an outline that starts, sort of a rough draft, and an outline really helps you to refine and edit your papers. And again, remember, in the syllabus, I listed Jordan Allred's contact information, and she is the tutor that's available to assist you with any writing concerns that you have, any issues. If you want to show her a rough draft, if you want to show even me, I'll take a look at your rough draft. If you want to say, hey, Dustin, is this on the right path? Do I have the kind of right idea for doing an iconographic or a visual analysis? This is new to me. Is this on the right path? I won't say, hey, change this, or change that, but I'll say, yes, you're on the right path, or here, I think you're missing the point on how to address the formal aspect of writing about some of like the characteristics. Maybe try this type of an exercise instead to help you, okay? So keeping that in mind, that throughout the semester, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Jordan Allred to help you to be able to craft a better writing approach to art historical analyses. The other thing to mention too in terms of writing about art is that this will be in the Chicago style. So for some of you, Chicago style is new. So I know a lot of people might be more familiar with MLA or APA for psychology. So Chicago is a little bit different, but the main thing is that, and here is a kind of a quick guide. I got a link to this Chicago style. And also there's, this is a way to do the citation is probably the biggest difference. So it's not a parenthetical documentation, if that makes sense, where you put in parentheses like some styles of annotation. Instead, what you do is you use notes. So if you're writing in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can make a small little number next to that word, and then that number will refer to either at the bottom of the page, what's called footnotes, or endnotes, which I actually prefer, but you can use either, endnotes that say, hey, number 1 refers to this text, or a little bit of an explanation. This is how I'm citing this. So that's the main thing. The other thing is you could have a little bit of a note. That this is why art historians use this. Say one painting refers to another painting or a history of another person. You wouldn't want to include all of that extraneous information into the paper itself, but you could footnote it or endnote it to refer back to a paragraph or a short couple of sentences that says, here we're talking about Charlemagne. Who is Charlemagne? Charlemagne's this person, and the art scholarship says that he was, a benevolent leader, and he really championed the promotion of the arts. Something along those lines. Doesn't need to be in the body of the text, but it could be in endnotes, okay? So that's really common for art scholarship. So I wanted to show you this, how to do the bibliography style in Chicago, this process, okay? So this is one source here. Another one that is really helpful is just a general guide to writing about art. And so as you're taking notes today about how to write about art for these 3 papers that we're going to do, I want to show you some of these brief synopsis or summations of how this is different from different types of art writing. Some general notes, first of all, is always common to write in an active voice. So you can say a painting does something, even if the painting was done 1,000 years ago, you can say it does this instead of it did that. Or you can say Charlemagne, did this, but in general, he is interested in pursuing this or pursuing that. So it keeps the voice more bold, more active, and keeping the tense really, really similar. So generally when we talk about art, we talk about it in sort of the active voice and also as present tense, okay? So the first type of paper, there are 4 main types that this article talks about, and generally I have my students do all 4 in an art history class, but since this one is so condensed and consolidated in the summer session, we're only going to hit the 3 main ones. The first one is called a formal or a visual analysis. And so what you're going to do is, if you're looking at a 2-dimensional work, you're going to talk about what you see. And what I like about art is the more you dig, the more will reveal itself to you, the more you will understand it. I really want you to slow down. Just really look, observe, carefully notice something, almost like this is a suspect, and you have to later give a description of them so someone could sketch it, or you have to identify them in a lineup. You're going to describe this painting or this sculpture that you select based on the parameters for the assignment for this first paper, visual analysis. You're going to select one piece. You're going to describe it as best you can. Really, really look at that object for quite a bit of time. And then describe the visual elements like line, shape, value. You could say light values, dark values, tints, shades, texture. You could say it appears to be smooth, it's rough, it's tactile. And also color. You could say, it uses pastels or it uses bold primary colors. You can really talk about the color scheme. So this is a visual analysis. For a visual analysis, you can get a little bit into what the piece might mean, what it could be about, but the majority, and that could even be your thesis, but the majority of the paper is going to be describing the way that the image looks. That is a formal analysis, and that'll be paper number 1. The second one that we won't cover is a stylistic analysis, so don't worry about that one. The third type is, which is going to be paper number 2, is called an iconographic analysis, or otherwise known as studying the iconology. Icon means image. Graphy means writing, so it is the writing of the image. It's discovering what the things that are presented as the subject matter mean, what they point to. A lot of times, if you think about writing about an image, like iconographic analysis, essentially what you're doing is, does this point to a story or a historical event, or maybe a writing like a biblical passage, or it's from the Quran, or it's from the Epic of Gilgamesh? Is there something that this artwork is pointing to that is outside of the artwork itself? And that's what you would write about. You would write about the symbolism. Now here, bear in mind, that might entail a little bit of research, in which case I'll require you to pick a particular piece. You have options. In this one, you have to pick from a specific list. And I've tried to pick things that have some interesting iconography, but that are also realistic and able to be studied, which I'll show you how to use the library website to be able to do that. So you could use scholarship, you could use art historical writings, you could use historical writings, you could use a book, a journal, to be able to base some of your thoughts on of what it's pointing to. So in other words, this example here, they're talking about Annabel Carracci's painting of Hercules. You could do some research, look up a book, look up an article. Who is Hercules? Or if in the painting there is contemporary examples of Venetian costumes, You could look up a book about in 17th century Venetian costumes or fashion or clothing, and you could write about, oh, this person's wearing purple, so that must mean that they were royalty. Or this person's wearing black, that represents evil. This person's white, that represents, they're wearing white, that represents purity. You could make some of those iconographic decisions. And it's interesting to think about this in the context of understanding and study and science. There's a lot of different elements that are coming here. When a museum gets a new piece, obviously what they're going to do is they're going to do as much research about that piece as possible to create a context of understanding. So when they put that piece up on the wall, they can have a box next to it, a title and an explanation, a placard that explains the context of the piece, the symbolism. Because think about it, like probably 17th century references to symbolism are probably lost on us today. We don't necessarily recognize those same symbols. So they'll decode it for us in that writing. That's essentially what you're doing as well. And one of my former students, Matt Boyd, who graduated from Lyon College, excuse the phone ringing, he graduated from Lyon College. He is a researcher. So one of the things he does is a museum. He works in Lansing at a major art museum at Michigan State University. When a piece comes in, he researches as much as he can. And he said, like, the amount of research that he does in a week is equivalent to like the amount of research he did in an art history class at Lyon over the course of the semester. He has to really hit it fast and furious and do a lot of research to be able to present a bigger picture about what that painting's about. So if anyone comes in and looks at it, he can explain to kids or adults or even create programming around that piece. So this is where I think it's really important to understand maybe some of this meaning is lost on us, but that a 17th century or a 3rd century or someone from Roman art history, they would have understood it in contemporary times, but maybe it's lost on us. We can dig, and that's where I say the more you look, the more you see, and the more you can understand about a particular piece. The last paper that we will do is a historical analysis, and that's here where it's talking a little bit about the provenance. So it doesn't list it as much in detail as the other ones, but a historical analysis is basically taking a little bit of visual analysis, what's happening in the painting, how it looks, doing a little bit of historical study like the provenance, which means where has it been, who owned it, who was the patronage, who made it, but also who commissioned it to be made. So maybe a king did or a pope did, and that would be important to part of the story as well. But also in terms of a historical analysis, what else was going on during that time, and see if you can find some primary sources written during the time that the piece was made, whether it was, 600 BCE or 1300 CE, like if it was recently or if it was way back when, what else was going on at that time in that region, politically, philosophically, religiously, environmentally, that maybe was the plague going on. All of those things could influence, whether it's overt or maybe a little bit more subtle, it's probably somewhere in the piece itself. So a historical analysis is talking about a little bit like the artist's life, without being too biographical about it, or the patron, whoever commissioned it, and also the times around that piece. If it was in Europe, what's going on in Europe in the 17th century when that piece was made? And that could somehow influence the piece itself. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through each of these. I'm going to start first with the visual analysis, and I'm using an image from our book. This will click open. This is on page 1069 in the book if you're following along. You have actually it's not in, unless you have the volume 1 and 2 combined. So this is a more recent piece that I wanted to use for a visual analysis. It is by the artist Chitao, and it is the Reminiscences of Nanking. And this is when the artist was a bit of a recluse, living by himself, living very remotely. So if we're to write a visual analysis, what I want you to do is pick an image from the book that was from one of the chapters that we've covered so far. Once you write that paper, which is due next Friday, hit one of the pieces that we had covered up to that point, and write a description of everything you see visually in it, still having some sort of a format so it flows from paragraph to paragraph, okay? So this piece right here, we could have, you're going to have in the first paragraph, you're going to have the artist, if known. Some of these pieces might be anonymous. The artist, if known, and the title of the piece and the date. And typically you write the title either in parentheses or italicized. Write the date, and then give us some sort of an introduction. You can say, for instance, this piece is a painting, an ink painting, and it has a very organic feel to it. And then you can have a thesis statement that says something along the lines of, for this piece, Shitao was an artist that lived remotely, and in a way, this piece reflects his life philosophy or his lifestyle with the type of ink and lines that he used. And then every paragraph below that should support that thesis and can come to some sort of a conclusion and a summation at the end. 2 to 3 pages, but the majority of this, and this is why I wanted to show you a piece to look at, majority of it should be describing the visual elements. So for a 2D piece, those are 5 things if you want to write these down. Line, shape, value, color, and texture. So if we're looking at the line here, we can say there's a natural, organic use of line, and how we see this solitary figure riding a horse going up the hills. And this was called Riding the Clouds. This was part of a larger folio of prints in the 18th century, where Shitao made numerous images in the part of the same series. So we can describe the line use, that it's not geometric line, right? It's organic line. It's soft, it's curvilinear, it has this kind of flowy pattern. And your language at first might be really descriptive, and eventually maybe you're incorporating more vocabulary and terminology that's typical to art history, but really I want your perspective. How do you describe these lines? And you can say in other sections the lines are more choppy and irregular and not as flowy and careful as these lines here. And then some represent more of a rocky and an aggressive, okay? So we can compare the line use here. Moving to shape, again, the same thing. These lines form this cloud-like shape here that he's riding up this formation that looks otherworldly in a sense. So we could describe the shapes here. There's a shape here, a shape down here. We can describe the way that shape is used. Of course, we don't want to ignore the fact that this isn't just an image. It's a scroll in the Chinese tradition, where the Chinese saw landscapes as a translation of their philosophical beliefs of spirituality. So we could write about how the visuals feel very organic and spiritual, and how there's writing on it. I wouldn't want to ignore that. There's calligraphic writing, and there's these stamps that the artist left their mark. This is all part of the visual scene. Shape, color. In this case, it's monochromatic, so it isn't colorful other than the red couple of stamps, but we can describe the color as being monochromatic, black and white, which goes along with value. There's some lighter values in sections, and then there's some medium values and some darker values. And you would describe that in a paragraph to build this overall kind of scene of what this landscape is like, this very spiritual-esque landscape that is both sad, I feel, morose, but also, to me, feels almost like a motivational poster. It's optimistic. It's sad for the moment, but maybe it's optimistic for the future. And the visual elements tell a story along those lines. Texture, also, we could use a sense of the texture, how this, like if I'm wanting to ride a horse, I'm probably going to stick to this path here, or maybe this path. I'm not going to try to go up this hill or this mountain, because the texture looks much more aggressive and foreboding. All right, so that's a bit of a peek of an exercise into a visual analysis, which is your first paper, writing about what you see. The second type of paper that you're going to do is the iconology, or an iconographic analysis. So for this piece here, this is in your book, and this is something we'll cover this semester. It's on page 277. It is an illuminated manuscript. And for an iconographic analysis, what you're doing is you're writing about the symbols that you see. Who is in the painting? What is the subject matter? And some of these things for us might be very, very clear. For instance, Christ at the center. It's pretty easy to tell because of common devices. He's in what's called a mandorla. This is a circle that's like body halo. He has a head halo, but he also has a body halo called a mandorla. But there's a lot of other figures around Christ that maybe are more unexpected or obscure. So I'll walk you through some of the ones that I know right off the bat. And then some of these will make more sense when we do a bigger, more in-depth study into some of the iconography in early Christian art. This figure right here, you can probably assume, is the Virgin Mary, Madonna, directly below Christ, and she has a halo as well. There are two angels flanking her. Well, how do I know they're an angel? Well, they have wings, right? The pretty stereotypical way that in early Christian art they reference. These are the type of things that you're going to write about. Who you see in the image and what they might mean. Here we see two more angels surrounding Christ. There's basically four angels holding up Christ as in this piece, which makes sense now because it appears as we look at these little strokes around here, almost creating the sense of movement, right? Does that make sense? Why would Christ be moving? Why would it be going up? Well, it's the ascension of Christ, right? After 3 days, resurrected from the dead, ascended into heaven. So this makes sense. That's the iconography. We can point to biblical texts, and if you wanted to, you could quote either scholarship about the Bible or the Bible itself and reference that this is the iconography that's in this. These are the witnesses that are watching this. One of the figures that I can identify here, typically St. John is always shown with his finger in a book because he's like, you know, the scholar, St. John the scholar, one of the evangelists. So here he's holding a book. And another easily identifiable figure is St. Peter. Peter is the first, and he was crucified, right? He was killed in Rome and crucified just like Christ. So he's holding a cross, but he's also holding keys. That's how I know it's Peter, because St. Peter, right, guards the gates of heaven. He has the keys to heaven. He was the founder of essentially the church, and a lot of people refer to him as the father of the Catholic Church, the first pope, right? And he's always shown holding keys. So that's who he is, and we could write about that, and we could refer to any historical texts that say St. Peter is depicted this way in not only illuminated manuscripts, but all of Christian iconography, right? So that's him there. This is curious here. Do you see these figures, right? These are a little bit more curious. We have these a little bit more imaginative wings here that appear decorative, but they also appear to be like this movement or this energy, which you could write about as well, that is sweeping Christ up. Well, if you look close, there appears to be animal heads. And if I count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And what I know about this is that the four evangelists, the four gospels that wrote about Christ and Christ's life and his crucifixion are always represented in illuminated manuscripts and throughout art history as animal heads. So, well, actually, that's not entirely true. We see 3 animal heads and a human head here. So Matthew is always shown as a man. So here is his head. It's abbreviation. And we see these wings all have eyeballs on them. So this is like basically telling us what happened, and there were witnesses, all of these witnesses to it, but that, it's also foreshadowing. Christ will come again, and everyone will witness that for a second time as well. That's the reference to these eyeballs here. So here we see Matthew represented as man. We see Mark over here represented as a lion. Luke is always represented as a calf, a young cow, and then John represented as an eagle. So a lot of times you'll see John with the book, but you also see an eagle nearby, which is interesting. So it's a shorthand. It's a way of abbreviating what these figures meant, how they were important, and audiences at the time would have understood this, a shorthand, a very abbreviated way of understanding, the 4 evangelists were there. They left their mark. They observed this, right? They were there. And all the eyeballs, they observed it, and they're also telling that this is going to happen again. He's going to come back. So in an iconographic or an analysis based on the symbolism, what you would do is you would write about all of the different elements in here as much as you can and research what they meant and why they're there. You might not have known this at first. You might not have even seen this. But now that you know it's there, it makes more sense. And like I said, the more you look, the more you dig, the more you're going to see, and the more you're going to understand about a particular piece. The third and the last type of analysis that we'll do this semester is called historical analysis. So the image that I'm showing you is from the book, and it's on page 411. And it is part of an overall series of objects that were really important during basically from the 10th century all the way up to about the 15th century. This one is from the 12th century, and they are called reliquaries or shrines. Reliquaries usually held some sort of either a part of a person's body, like someone's fingernail or their ear or their head. Like they were really kind of morbid and creepy, but they were really fancy objects that were created to give that person reverence and to commemorate their life or their importance in the tradition of the Christian church. These were really important during that time period, especially they probably met their peak in the 13th century, 14th century, when sometimes the budget for the building of a church would be the same exact budget for making the reliquary, which is like this big. So in other words, you would spend as much money on the gold for this reliquary as all the materials to build this huge cathedral. It's just like mind-boggling to consider, but it shows how valuable and how important the status of these objects. So for a historical analysis, what I would do is I would write about this piece. First of all, Nicholas of Verdun is an actual person. He's a goldsmith. He's the artist that designed this. And this is the Shrine of the Three Kings. So then I could do a little bit of historical analysis. Who are the three kings? And I could also, not only that, but this is a particular cathedral. And I could research when the cathedral was built, who had it commissioned, and why that favors into the designation of this piece looking a particular way. If you notice, it's in a shape of a church. It looks like the cathedral itself. So we could talk about the person who designed this and talk about the person who designed the church and what the connection there is. But also if anything else is going on in 1190 or the late 12th century. What's going on during that time? You could talk about feudal times and kings and serfdom and all of that sort of thing. But you could talk about the political structure and also any sort of strife that was happening. You could talk about the idea of the Crusades that were happening during this time and going to Jerusalem to find things to put in your church. Because after all, during this time of pilgrimage, the reason was you were giving a people a reason to come see your church. And the churches were pilgrimage spots. To this day, people still do like the Way of St. James, Compostela de Santiago. I don't know, you probably have heard of people doing this tour where you walk about 100 miles to wind up at this church. But back in the day, these ancient pilgrimages, these old pilgrimages, they would go from church to church to go see the reliquaries, to go see the shrine, to go see the church, the cathedral. It was cultural and religious pilgrimage. So you could write about that in terms of historical analysis. For this paper, I give you a list of a few objects that you can select from to be able to do very targeted research into that object and what was going on around the time that influenced that particular piece. So I just wanted to give you an overview on the three very different types of writing that you're going to do this semester and help you to conceptualize it early on so you can begin to do some of the research that you will need to do for this. So if I come back to this page here and I go to the papers, so click on Writing About Art, and visual analysis is here, and the deadline is a week from tomorrow at midnight, and it takes a little bit of time to write these, so obviously don't wait for the last minute. The iconographic analysis, I'm just going to click on this to show you where you have options. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different options. They're listed in the book that you can write about for your iconographic analysis, and you can dig into the imagery. One really good source to go to is the Metropolitan Museum. I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of research. So one of the things that's a really, really great resource to be able to search is the Met Museum has recently digitized all of their publications. So they do these journals that come out a few times a year. They're really, really expensive, and they've been doing them for 100 years. You can research any of these. So I'm going to just do a keyword here, and I'm going to do, we're going to do Mark represented as lion and just see if anything comes up for this. Nope, nothing. I'm going to do illuminated manuscripts to be a little bit more broad. And you can then use this as a source and look at all these informational journals that come up. This one right here, this one could be very helpful. about illuminated manuscripts. We can read this online, or we could download the entire PDF, and then you could cite this source in the Chicago style. It shows this publication that talks about these different types. Oh, who do we see here, right? We see a lion. Perhaps that's representing Mark as a lion. And then, get into the context of the information surrounding that. Another resource that I want you to be able to be familiar with is the Mabey-Simpson Library, and how a lot of the collections are now digital. So even though you can't go, maybe you don't live in Batesville, maybe you can't physically get to the Mabey-Simpson Library or the ASU library or another library to go walk in, you can still do some research online and get a hold of a book, either by seeing it online or requesting it and picking it up from your local library. There's the Interlibrary Loan, ILL. So here's the Mabey-Simpson Library. Click on Visit the Library, and I have these links in the Writing About Art folder. And here you can do an article search or a journal finder search. We also have a research guide on art that the librarians at Lyon put together. Super helpful. You can take a look at that. It gives you more information about how to research, in particular, in art. Here's the Interlibrary Loan. So you could ask for something and pick it up from Lyon if you wanted to. Check it out for the entire semester. And then here's how to do a journal finder. You could also use, if you wanted to, Google Scholar for anything. But maybe you're looking for an ebook. We can search that as well. This is going to search for title, but if you do keyword, a lot of times it'll come up with a related title. So I'm just going to look up reliquary, because that could be helpful for my paper about the Nicholas of Verdun Shrine of the Three Kings. And here we go. Look at this. A Pilgrim's Reliquary by the author of the Fragments of Italy and the Rhineland in Germany. It's an ebook, and I could click on it and I could see the entire text, which is really, really handy. So you don't even have to walk into a library to be able to do this research. Because I'm going to ask that you have at least 2 scholarly sources, not just a website article, and then also a book for the last 2 papers. The first paper, no research necessary. It's just looking at the piece, telling me what you see based on your perspective. But the iconographic and the historical analysis, you'll have to do some research. Okay? I hope this has been helpful. I wish you good luck on working on these papers. I'm seriously very, very interested in reading all of your papers this semester. I love reading art history research. Even though some of you might pick the same exact piece, I guarantee you're going to find different articles to source, and you're going to have different perspectives on them. So I really enjoy reading it. Like I mentioned before, I'm willing to look at an early draft if you want me to, and the Writing Center can do the same thing. So I highly recommend getting an extra set of eyes on your papers before you hand them in, and to do your due diligence, create an outline, organize it, write it, edit it, proof it, refine it before you hand the final in as well. So if there's any other questions, feel free to email me, reach out, or interrupt me during one of my lectures. So this is the lecture for Friday. There won't be any other chapter that's covered. And then Monday we'll be back with the Greek art. All right? So signing off. Peace out. Hope everyone's doing okay. Bye.